everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Wilson Zehr. Now, Wilson is an experienced technology entrepreneur and academic. In fact, he's got 3 PhDs. As the founder of Cendix, or Zairmail, a company streamlining the process of sending physical mail, and basically we can call that snail mail today, as a bit of a, but basically sending physical mail for business development, Wilson brings a unique perspective of direct mail marketing in today's digital age, and I'm going to be curious about what that is, or what bunch of things it's about it is. While some might say it's outdated, it definitely still does work. Throughout his career, he's had the opportunity to launch a total of 6 tech startups, raise 60 million venture capital while maintaining a strong belief in the power of direct mail for customer engagement. And along the way, he's managed to do a few degrees and 3 PhDs. So, Wilson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jeff. Appreciate the opportunity, for sure.
Okay. So, you've done more degrees than most people do in 6 lifetimes, which is just amazing. So obviously you must be curious and also just love learning. So, but you did a computer science degree, and now you're doing this direct mail. In other words, things that arrive in a letterbox.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to go straight to that, actually. What made you start Zairmail? Because this is the most curious thing. In a digital age, you're doing physical, not email, physical mail directed to people's letterboxes. What inspired that?
Yeah, great question. I'm a little perplexed by that myself some days. But anyway, when we worked on a couple of startups, well, the first startup I did on my own was something called 𝓬𝓫. It was jointly funded by Microsoft, Intel, France Telecom, and Telecom Italia. And what we're doing is looking at voice over IP applications.
Yes.
You know, some of the technology we worked on is still in use today, and things like Skype.
Wow.
But it was at that point in time, you know, when the internet was first, you know, getting traction and exploding. And the internet, by the way, it's been around for a long time. It's just the browser and stuff was something new, allowed us to connect regular users to the internet.
It democratized the internet, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Yeah, and it really, I mean, people use the internet in different ways too. In one way, it's a big communications pipe. In another way, it's a data store. In another way, it's a way to, you know, access information or to not access information, but to complete transactions, right? So it does lots of different things depending on how you link it together. But you know, the browser and HTML really made that all possible. I mean, I was using the internet in the late 80s to send email from a software company I worked at called Verdix. I did the news feed in the Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest, in that period of time. So it was available in the university community. It just wasn't available to most consumers.
Yes. Yeah, and that was intriguing. So for me, looking at the internet was used from about the 1970s, I think, right through to the 1990s, exclusively pretty well for the academic community. In other words, it was a academic product.
Actually, yeah, and actually the internet was a DARPA project. It started as a military research project.
Yep.
And the whole idea was to create a network that had no single point of failure. Because when you're attacked by an enemy, you know, traditional theory is that you want to take out, you know, you want to take out communication, you want to take out supplies, and you want to take out power, you know.
Yeah.
And coming up with a network that had no single point of failure seemed like a very good way to make sure that the country itself was more resilient. Yeah. So they started out building a network among major universities here in the United States, both the East Coast and West Coast, and they had to create some different devices to do that. The original computers weren't capable of doing that, weren't capable of talking to each other at all. It's a company called BBN made those first switches. It's a really interesting story. There's a great video on it on the History Channel, where they talk about, you know, the all the enabling technology. So the switches, BBN switches, the creation of TCP/IP, Ethernet. They had to invent Ethernet to transmit signals. And then of course, all the servers had to, had to become a little more intelligent, a little more powerful.
Mm.
And then the endpoints, right? There's a lot of changes required on the PC side too, or
Yeah.
the personal side.
Yeah.
I've got a really great graphic where I break it down into levels. So we look over time and how these, how they feed into each other. The cool thing about um, diffusion of technology innovation is that it tends to layer on itself over time, one layer after another layer, and the layer before enabling the next.
Mm.
So it's really interesting how each new technology inspires a whole wave of even newer technology that people
Yeah.
build on.
Okay, so let's get back to the original question.
So sorry.
Why are we using old analog technology called direct mail? And that's what I'm really curious about.
All right, so to go back to where we started, there was this there was this recognition at that point for me that there was something called convergence, right? So we had all of this legacy, all of these legacy systems that were in existence that were doing jobs, but now we had the internet, and people were counting on the internet to do certain kinds of work, and there was a huge opportunity to bring convergence between those systems, to somehow connect legacy systems with the internet, internet applications and internet services that people were using. So in eFusion, we did voice over IP, and we connected the internet to the public telephone network, the old
Right.
public
Yeah.
telephone networks. So we're
Yeah.
dealing with old switches, old analog switches and stuff, and trying to figure out how to turn that into digital voice.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting. And so Zairmail is really focused on convergence between electronic media, and everything starts out electronically today. If you're doing a letter or a bill or anything, I mean, it doesn't start out as a piece of paper anymore. It starts out as a digital file.
Yes.
And if you have to mail that to somebody, how does that work? And so we've created this process that allows you to submit a document, submit a list, and we route it electronically to a place near where it needs to go, and then produce it and mail it. So it's faster, it's easier, it's better for the planet, and it just makes sense within the context we work in today. But it's not the only opportunity like that. I mean, our first Zairmail started out in the Draper Fisher portfolio. DFJ is a tier 1 California VC, and they also were the guys who did, they funded Skype, they did Hotmail, which was free email. If you remember that platform. They did eFax, which was convergence, free faxes. They did Homestead, which is free websites. So there's a whole series of services like that in the portfolio, and we just fit pretty well with that offering.
You're right.
But Zairmail, the concept of Zairmail's been around for a while. I mean, the first company was first started long ago. It's been sold a couple of times. We got it back. And that's a longer story that I'd be happy to share sometime. But we brought it up on our new technology, started up, and orders just kept coming in. The demand is there for the product that we offer. And the interesting thing about what we do, or the way we approach what we do, is most people in our space are commercial printers. And so they're very focused on the production side of things, which is good. I mean, we have partners like that we use in our network too. But we are a software and technology company, and we always have been. So that's the way we look at the problem, just as we did with eFusion, looking at voice over IP, right? So we're looking at how do we use technology to shape the kind of applications we can deliver. So we have an application called Flights, where we'll take a big, 1,000,000 records, and we have documents and schedules, and we'll automatically slice it up, send it out, track the progress of the mail, and alert people when it's been delivered. And that happens lights out 24/7. We can just start that up and it goes. We can take a single job, break it up, and spread it across an entire network across the United States. We can do We've got a new one, a new application that's really kind of cool. It's what we call Speedy, and anybody who wants to can download it. Speedy is free to download. It's at www.zairmail.com/speedy. And what it is a desktop application. You download it, it puts an icon in your desktop. You create a letter, even if it's just one letter. You drop it on the icon. It says, where do you want to send it? You put in an address or select an address from your, from your address book, and out it goes. It turns into a letter and gets delivered in the mail.
Right. But
And
it's okay. So tell us a bit about, okay, how you actually execute a digital to, do you have a company that actually takes a digital signal and then actually prints a letter and then puts it in a
we do. So what we do
envelope
is,
and then puts
oh, sorry.
a stamp on it. So I'm trying to understand, we've got the concept. I'm just wondering, take me through what actually happens physically, because we're talking about physical delivery, and why would you do it, and what are the results you're getting?
Yeah, so we have a network of production partners today,
Yep.
and these are commercial printers that also do mail. We have partners today in Oregon, um, two locations in California, in Dallas, Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, and in Iowa.
Yep.
And we're always looking at tuning the network, changing the network. But the basic idea is that customer will come to the site, they upload a document, they upload their list, they see a preview in real time of what's going to be produced, and they like what they see, they push the button, and they're in the mail tomorrow, the next day. So really, literally takes 60 seconds to launch a campaign. We're looking across the network. We see what is it being produced, what facilities have the ability to produce that file or that job.
Hmm.
And so it could be a postcard or a letter or self mailer or snap pack or any number of things. It could be black and white or color. So we're looking across the network and see who has the ability to print something like that. And then where's the most effective place to print it? So for example, you say, well, maybe this letter is going to DC. So maybe it makes more sense to print it in Baltimore. Well, but if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here on the West Coast, that doesn't make more sense because they're not going to print it today. But if I
Hmm.
started in Sacramento, I could print it there and I'd already be, in the mail before the other guys even started on it. So we use some heuristics like that to figure out the best space to produce and mail. We also provide tracking on every piece of mail, so we can tell how it flows through the network, and we can tell when it's delivered and alert the sender to the delivery of the mail. Sending direct mail like that is it's a new approach to the problem. It's a lot more efficient, a lot more cost effective, a lot faster. I mean, used to be if you submitted a direct mail to a commercial printer, first of all, unless it was big enough, unless it was a couple thousand pieces, nobody would even look at it because nobody wanted to deal with it.
Yep.
But even if they did, you're talking 7 to 10 days just to get in the mail. And I don't have any jobs that take 7 to 10 days. I mean, we're sending out very large jobs tomorrow or the next day. I mean, and the way we do that is with automation. We're not touching any of those files in that way. I mean, we're using technology to transform them into print-ready files. They can be printed, inserted, use all the inserting equipment. We put all the marks on them and stuff to make the equipment work. So it's produced and mailed very efficiently. And from the standpoint of our partners, if we're handling the sales and the customer service and the automation, and all they have to do is produce and mail, then it makes life a lot easier for them too.
Hmm.
So they're not worried if it's 2,000 pieces because the way I submit it, everything they get is going to be in larger volume and it's going to be formatted correctly to work exactly the way their facility needs to.
Right.
And historically, doing something like I talked about with Speedy, with one piece of mailing, it's just impossible unless you want to do it at home. Um, but in our case, we will batch that up with a bunch of other letters. We lay down all the marks and stuff, make it a proper print-worthy file, and we'll produce that through a commercial production facility. So it's better quality, it's faster, it's easier, it's trackable. Um, and I think it's better for the environment. It's just a win for everybody.
Right. So I've got a few questions. So number
Okay.
one, who's your ideal customer profile, in other words, and then what sort of mailing are you doing? And then the third question is, what sort of results are you seeing? Because the problem we have with digital overload and email is that it goes to trash, it goes to spam, open rates have just gone through the floor. So who's your ideal customer profile? Let's deal with that first. Who's your target market that you're providing the service for?
Okay, so I think that there's a couple of different answers. So,
Mhm.
um,
Well, there always
you
is.
indulge me for a second. I mean, because there's lots of people who do mail. I mean, historically, we've done a lot of work with realtors, mortgage brokers, independent insurance agents. But you can see other people, doing pest control, um, pool cleaners, landscapers. I mean, all kinds of small business, especially if they've got a targeted market to hit. This turns out to be a very effective tool.
Yep.
That said, if I'm looking at our business overall, who are our ideal customers, we offer services to all of those customers. And because of automation, as I mentioned before, it doesn't matter if it's just 500 pieces. I mean, we'll offer that service to everybody. But our ideal customer is somebody who is using the mail in a way that is strategic to their business, and they're going to send jobs of 20,000 to 50,000 pieces 2 to 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
That profiles fits debt collection, it fits call centers, it fits lots of different applications that 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 might not be as familiar to America as general, but there are people doing that and we still do a lot of first class mail. And when you think about mail, um, there actually there's a number of classes of mail, but the two most common are first class and standard A. Standard A used to be what we would call in the old days junk mail or bulk mail,
Mm-hmm.
right? And typically, standard A was associated with advertising mail. So if I'm getting something from Visa or MasterCard or somebody like that, somebody's sending millions of pieces of mail, I'm, I'm using bulk mail. The reason for that is that the bulk of the cost in direct mail is postage. Postage is about 70% of the cost. And in general, standard A is going to be about, 20 cents cheaper. So there's a delta. So if you're mailing millions of pieces of mail, that makes a big difference. And so the people would tend to focus on that. If you're doing smaller mailings, if you're like the landscaper or the realtor or whoever, then the difference between the savings is A, not as large, but B, you're going to get a better class of service. So most of what we mail today is first class mail. And most of what you'd see a large commercial printer who's not enabled with our service print would be standard A.
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
so yeah.
So, in terms of you're really using technology to make doing direct mail easier, faster, and cheaper. Is that how you describe it?
I'd say more cost effective. I mean, yeah, maybe certainly in terms of the amount of time and effort involved, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm
One of,
talking about. Yeah.
yeah, one of the things that one of the mistakes entrepreneurs make, I believe, is they tend to look at their own time as being free.
Yeah.
But but time is one of those things you never have enough of,
You can
especially if
never,
you're
and you can never buy it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, and if you look at the kind of thing we're doing, I mean, literally, when you go launch a campaign in 60 seconds, you're in the mail tomorrow, the next day, you're delivered, anywhere in the US within 3 days, usually with first class mail. And you're going to get, feedback when it's delivered, So I mean, it is a very powerful tool. And I can explain why you might want to use direct mail rather than digital in some cases too.
Yep.
Um, if that's a conversation you want to have. So you,
Yeah. So, okay. So that actually is one of the other questions I have. So, and
okay,
how do you measure results is the other question I have.
okay,
Yeah. And why should they use direct mail instead of email? So,
okay.
yeah.
No, that's a great question. And it's an important question, I believe.
Yep.
Um, so I think that, sometimes the discussion comes down to why digital, why physical, isn't that stuff old? Why would I use that?
Yep.
and the and yes, I mean it's been around for a long time, like some other mediums have. But I would tend to look at it more like a toolbox, right? As a marketer, you need a toolbox with lots of tools in it.
Yep.
And you need to be able to use the right tool to solve the right problem.
Yep.
And and so that's really where we go with this. I mean, if we think about direct mail, the Direct Marketing Association says on average it returns $13 for every dollar invested.
Right.
So that's assuming a well-targeted piece with a well-performing offer.
Yes.
So in general, if you're using direct mail, the formula is 70% list, 20% offer, 10% creative. Whatever's left is creative. So we want to find the right audience, and if we can make the right offer to the right audience, then good things happen.
Hmm.
Right? And so that's really the formula. So it turns out that the list is the most important part, not the creative. But most people focus on it the other way. They focus on the creative part.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah. Well, you need to have people that are actually the right audience. Otherwise, it's trying to sell,
Exactly.
basically, yeah. You don't want to be selling something to someone that doesn't like, okay, what do we want to sell? I want to sell fax machines to teenagers. Of course, that's not going to work. So,
Exactly. That's why when you're trying to boil the ocean, you're just trying to send to everybody. That's not very effective. People can do that with tools like email marketing because the cost per send is very low. If you're doing a
mm,
million emails, you may only pay a quarter penny a piece or something like that, something very small. Actually, probably less than that. Um, but if you're sending direct mail, every piece you send out needs postage, and postage costs money. So you're going to have to, in order to produce a return, you're going to need to make sure it's very targeted and you have the right offer. The way to do that depends on the audience, and it requires testing.
yep.
Um, so the question is why, how do you measure? So that usually what we're looking at is return on investment.
Mm,
So return on investment means dollars out versus dollars in. We have to make sure when we do that calculation, we have to factor in lifetime customer value.
mm,
That's a common omission, right? If I'm spending $10 to get somebody to spend five, you say, why would I do that? Well, except he's going to spend $5 a month for the next 12 months, then that changes the equation,
mm-hmm. Yep.
right? So direct mail, because it's always been ROI or numbers driven, that's why it survives, because as soon as it stops making sense, people stop using it.
Yep.
But people are showing positive ROI, so they keep using it. And these days we have lots of people who are new marketers who've only, been exposed to digital that are rediscovering it. So
Mm.
that's kind of an interesting phenomenon
Well, it's, well,
too.
it's almost becoming unique. In other words, if I sent, a digital colleague I've never met before, but I send him a gift and it arrives in the mail, that's memorable because everyone does email, but no one sends things by snail mail. So yes, it's very memorable. The other question I have is, and talks
Well,
about target audience. Is there something you want to say about that, or?
no, I'm going back to your other point. You asked me before too, why? I mean, we're talking about what's unique about this tool. If we think about a toolbox, and I could tell you a story about some ways we use it, but there's a couple of things that are about mail that make it very unique. Um, First of all, it's proactive, right? If I'm using Google AdWords or something like that, which is a great tool, fine tool too, we use it. Um, but I have to wait for people to come find me. But there's sometimes when I just want people to I want to find them. I want them to respond to my offer. So mail allows us to be proactive. It's proactive communication. Secondly, mail can reach everybody in the United States 6 days a week, mostly. Um, uh, I'd say mostly mainly because some businesses are not open 6 days a week. Some businesses are open
Mm,
only 5 days a week. But to the extent that they're open, um, I know how to reach them, and I can deliver a message to them. Um, if you're talking about something like email, even though it has the cost advantage that we talked about, being able to connect with everybody is not even possible. Something like 35% of even legitimate emails never delivered.
That's
It's
right.
caught
Yeah.
spam filters and what have you. Um, and the third thing is that the targeting, the lists are very well developed. So if I want to find Jewish dentists in New Jersey to purchase a car in the last 6 months, I can probably do that. I can probably get a mailing address. But trying to do that for a digital delivery point is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So on the other question I have too about this
okay.
is this more for targeting local, helping local businesses, or national organizations that are trying to reach local businesses? Is that, I'm just trying to think about, you talked about things like dentists, you talked about, you know, florists, that sort of thing. So, um, is that the sort of, like, you got the ideal customer profile, the one that wants to send it, but the audience they're trying to reach is more local rather than national?
It just depends on the customer and the application. Certainly, if you're a florist or a pool cleaner or a realtor, then you're probably focused in a local area, and we see a lot of that. But we do have very large national organizations too, organizations that send mail to people all over the United States. Because with some of those businesses we're talking about, the thing that makes those potential customers a target is their location, right? They're close to the place where we deliver a product or service. But there are some products or services that we might offer that are not location specific. So,
Mhm.
for example, imagine I'm trying to do, this is not direct mail specifically, but imagine I'm trying to do debt collection.
Yep.
Imagine if I'm a mortgage broker trying to do cash out refis. I mean, there's no reason why I just need to do that in Oregon. I can offer that product nationwide.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
so there can be a local component, but it's certainly not a requirement.
Right.
Uh, the better requirement is that that I have a good list and a good offer, and I can generate a positive ROI.
Right. So in terms of measuring a positive ROI, because um, on the internet, it's basically you can measure but you sometimes trying to work out how did people discover me? What was the first click? And the click could have been an ad, it could have been an SEO, it could be so how. Whereas, how do you actually measure that it's actually the direct mail that's produced it? Because that's actually not digitally recorded. So, how do you do that? Is that because that's the only marketing they're doing at the time and it's coded or something?
No, attribution is, I think, what we're talking about. And
Yes.
attribution is a big deal. Being able to figure out, who's responding to my offer, which ones are producing results and which ones are not. Typically with mail, we use a response device to do that, some kind of a response device. So
A,
phone
fixed,
number,
a certain number.
fax number, not that people use fax anymore, but
No.
historically, a specific landing page. Um,
Okay. Right.
and we have the ability in our system too to generate a PIN. So we can generate a PIN number that's specific to a client, to a client and to a campaign. And that PIN number will identify where the piece came from. Historically, the biggest way that people identify that is by using a 800 number. So they use a toll-free number. You can buy toll-free numbers. There are lots of places to get toll-free numbers, and then you just program them to redirect to your office. But then at the end of the month, you can scan down your toll-free numbers, and you can see which campaigns are producing
Okay.
calls.
Right. Okay. Right. That
Yeah.
makes total sense because I used to do direct mail. I actually use as fax for marketing, and it was a lot of fun. So Jay Abrams was one guy that I used to use as my inspiration for direct marketing back in the 1990s. He's been around a long time. So, all right. So you are generating data at the other end. You are using your tool to actually create, save you time, and be very efficient to actually create the direct mail that's sent out by your partners.
Uh-huh.
So, are you, to make sense of the noise and data, because you're trying to find signal in the noise, are you using AI? And there's going to be a segue from this. are you using AI to help you make sense of the noise? In other words, what's working, what's not? Are you doing that at all, or that's next, or we never
I
going to?
was, yeah, I would say we're approaching a little bit differently. I mean, it's so when we're doing network routing and we're looking out at the environment, we have to take a lot of factors into consideration. In today's environment, everybody needs an AI story, and that would be ours. Except I'm very realistic about it when I talk to people. I say, this is real intelligence. This is not artificial. We're looking at the factors in the network and we're making decisions in an automated way.
Right.
Uh,
So, in
Language
terms of,
models and
yeah. So the other thing I want to ask too is, okay, so what are the real numbers in terms of uh, making it very efficient to send a mail? In other words, do you reduce costs in terms of getting that all done? So what's your numbers compared to other people doing direct mail versus you doing your technology to do direct mail? Is there any statistics or numbers in terms of we save 20% of costs, we deliver better, faster? What's your data tell you about you versus your competitors, for example?
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm not sure that I have, specific numbers that we quote in that way. I will say that if you need to be in the mail, you have a piece of mail jobs is 50,000 pieces, and you need to be in the mail tomorrow, the next day. We're the only people that are going to be able to do that for you.
Okay, well, that's the right answer. That's what I was trying to find out in terms of you make it easy and fast. Would that be a good summation?
Yeah, easy and fast, and we have the automation. So if we need to do other interesting things, you want to hook it to a CRM, or you want to hook it to an application, or any other way that you want to um, play around with mail algorithmically, we have the ability to do that because once we've captured it digitally, there's lots of things we can do to it before we turn it into paper.
Right. The other question I have is that it sounds to me like you're only operating from the USA. Is that correct?
We're only producing mail in the USA
Yeah.
today, the USA and Canada, and we
Yep.
we had a facility, a dedicated facility in Canada, but we weren't getting enough volume. But if we have the volume, that will return. I mean,
Hmm.
the relationship still exists.
Okay.
Um, I think this is one of the areas where I think Speedy has a really cool, really great role to play. Speedy, the application, they'll even take a single letter. Speedy was designed to take the place of a postal meter. I'm not sure if you have those where you
Never,
are.
never heard of it.
Okay, but here in the United States, a lot of large corporations have something called a postal meter. The leading provider in that industry forever has been a company called Pitney Bowes.
Yes.
Um, and the reason why they exist is because a lot of companies look at postage like money. And so they need an effective system to manage this money. Like somebody
Yep.
might, take off with the postage or send their own personal letters or what have you. So they tend to treat that postage as money. But and the way that works is some people print the mail internally in the internal mailroom, and then they run it through the Pitney Bowes machine. The Pitney Bowes machine puts postage on it, and then they still have to get it in the mail. But from our perspective, that's really not the biggest part of the problem, right? I know how to get stamps and I know how to get postage. The really hard part is is that I have to create a letter, I have to print it, I have to fold it, I have to insert it, I have to address it,
Hmm.
I have to address it properly, then I have to get postage on it, and then I still have to get it in the mail,
Yep.
which if you're a mailroom means you still got to put it in a truck and drive it somewhere, or somebody's got to come pick it up. So there's a lot of pieces missing. With a tool like Speedy, you can just create the letter, push the button, and boom, it's gone. You does just bypass that entire process.
Wow.
So
Okay.
and that's probably a $6 billion market, postal meters.
Wow.
Um,
Mm.
but because the way the tool is designed, consumers can use it in the same way. A consumer can put a letter because we don't care whether it's a business or a consumer. And if you have your consumer who's in another part of the world, wherever that might be,
Mhm.
um, if you're in New Zealand, you could drop your letter on this icon. It will fly across the ocean electronically, end up in a queue here, be batched, processed, printed, folded, inserted, mailed next day, and at a fraction of the postage. You don't have to pay international postage. Oh, and by the way, nobody had to pay for any jet fuel to get it there.
Okay, so you're distributing the distribution.
Yeah, so if you're doing international mail, if you're in an international location and you're doing mail to the United States, there is no more efficient way to do that.
Very cool. All right, I'm going to segue to something very, very non-direct mail, because you're in the middle of doing a degree, I believe, at Harvard University, or have done it, on which has a lot of AI in it. I'm interested in, and you've been in business for a long time. You've done 6 startups. You've done raised venture capital, and it sounds like your brain's running at a million miles an hour, all the time. So you're studying AI. What are some of the things that are fascinating you about AI and generative AI, for example? And what are you learning? What are your insights from your Harvard experience, education experience about AI?
AI is interesting, but the AI that we see today is a lot of different than, well, let me back up and say, even before the Harvard program, right? I started as a software engineer. And even back in the 80s, when I started as a software engineer, people were talking about AI, except AI looked more like HAL from 2001 Space Odyssey, the
Yeah,
movie.
dystopian. Yep.
Exactly. So along the way, people have tried inventing languages like Lisp and others. They've tried creating knowledge bases. They've tried expert systems. There's been a lot of different incarnations of AI along the way. In this particular case, we're looking at large language models, and they're really looking at pattern matching. And
Mm,
based on patterns that occur in data, different pools of data, then being able to generate new ideas based on prompts. It's a completely different, I mean, artificial intelligence for me is more like, have you ever seen the movie I, Robot with
yes.
Will Smith?
Yep.
I mean, that looks like artificial intelligence to me. But this is a step along the way. So I mean, all of that stuff has to evolve. Um, because we're doing pattern matching, there are some natural limitations built into it. Like there are lots of examples of, you know, people doing 1 + 1 = 6. Well, you say, well, how's that work? Well, because AI is not really doing the math. It's just looking at an image of a one and an image of a one, and it sees enough images of one that match it, that are matched with an image of 6. It just figures that's the way it should work.
Mm,
Um, the other thing I will say is the the place I've spent most of my research time most recently is on innovation, diffusion of innovations and stages in the life cycle. I
mhm,
actually did a PhD dissertation on it. So that information is public. You can find it in Google Scholar.
mhm,
Um, but basically, depending on the point of the life cycle, different kinds of innovation are more important, whether that's product innovation, process innovation,
mhm,
marketing innovation, organizational innovation. Um, and when we're talking about creativity and innovation, that always brings me back to generative AI. And
mhm.
I think that there's some natural limitations, and I'm not saying these won't be overcome. I mean, people definitely will work on them. But if you think about the way AI would approach that with a large language model, is they look at all the successful outcomes, and based on these successful outcomes, or popular outcomes, they're going to forecast a new one. But that's not really the way the innovation happens. Innovation is a process of trial and error. We learn as much from every mistake as we do from every successful venture, sometimes more from every mistake. They asked Edison one time, he said, you failed 100 times making a light bulb. Why do you keep doing that? And he said, because every time I try,
I
I
learned something.
learn,
Mm,
yeah, there's one more way I'm not supposed to do it, and process of elimination, it gets me closer to a solution.
yep.
Um, but AI, the way it's conceived of today, doesn't really go through that step. So there's a whole bunch of, I think, without having access to the mathematics behind it, um, there are a whole bunch of false steps or mistakes that we don't get to see. And because we don't see them, we can't take off from them or evolve from them.
Right. Yep.
Okay. And then the second thing is because of the way AI is designed, it can never know when it's finished, right? I mean, it doesn't, the only way it can be finished is if a human says, oh, that works. That makes sense.
Mm.
Right. So it not only can I not make the mistakes, but it doesn't, that process of going through the iterations to arrive at a final product is problematic too, because I don't have some being there to say, oh, no, that's right. Oh, no, that's wrong. Take a right, take a left, have you ever done brainstorming, with a
Yep.
group of people?
Yep.
And you're in a room, and the one thing you say, you don't say that's a bad idea. You just try and capture all the ideas you can say. And then one person will say something, and somebody else will say, "Oh yeah," they'll play off that and play off that and play off that, and that process is
Mm.
what leads to new innovations and new creations. But
Mm.
I think with the technology we have today, it's difficult to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not impossible, it's
Mm.
just trickier.
Yeah.
So when we can use and most ideas, I mean, thinking out loud, most ideas are not really all seminal genius, right? All
No.
some new idea. A lot of times it's a combination of old stuff, maybe even unrelated old stuff that we put together, mail and the internet. So,
And yeah, and sometimes the alchemy works, and other times it doesn't.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if every pattern in the future, if every solution in the future is going to look like all the patterns in the past, then that's not very interesting, is it?
Well, there's no future, then there's no innovation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Interesting. All right.
yeah, so I think it's really cool and it's exciting. People are doing some great things. Certainly, generative AI has a lot to bring. Um, it's not the holy grail of AI. We've got a lot more to do.
Oh yeah, we just
Um,
started. We're essentially 2 years in the democratization of AI, which is ChatGPT and chatbot.
exactly.
So what's happened? I am blown away by the velocity of change and development. And we're seeing basically about $1 trillion in data centers, and investment in the large language models and so on. So the amount of money pouring in is going to cause a bubble. But again, we are laying the foundation for continuing to evolve AI to be our assistant, to be our guide, to be our coach. Because I think for me with AI, I'm watching it going, all of us come from a fixed past, brought up a certain way. We went to the same church, went to the same, um, you know, went to the same, group, football, college, whatever it is, right? So we go to college. So we're all raised in bubbles, aren't they? They're different bubbles. So we end
Mhm.
up having quite fixed thinking. And what I love about brainstorming with AI is that it can come up with combinations you haven't even thought of.
It's
And
true.
that's for me is that I think the AI can break our own vertical bubbles that trap us in the past, but we need to be open to the future to find the innovation and the recombination of the world's intelligence, which is what's sitting, and knowledge, which is sitting in the cloud, um, in ones and zeros. So we actually, for me, I find it exciting because I will ask a question of AI and it's tapping the world's intelligence, the world's wisdom, the world's knowledge, and it comes up in ways that I wouldn't have thought of, and then I can recombine it myself as well on top of that. But it breaks the bubble of our templated thinking that traps us almost in a prison of our own mind.
Right. I mean, you think about some of the work with companies like IDEO and others have done, right? The idea is that you have if you have groups that have diverse backgrounds and life experiences,
Much more
you,
creative.
yeah, then you can get better solutions. I mean, if you think about a Venn diagram, and there's one person, they have certain amount of knowledge and life experiences. If we have a lot of different people with non-overlapping you know spaces, then our potential solution set becomes much larger, exponentially larger.
Yep, that's what I'm saying, and that's what makes
Yeah.
it exciting. And I think For me, I see AI as both an amplifier and accelerator of human intelligence. Um, as our, as our coach assistant, that has almost perfect knowledge, that can recall it in seconds. So for me, but it doesn't mean that we hand over the keys of the kingdom to the AI. We actually use it as our coach and assistant to help us break boundaries down that we quite often as humans are locked in, and that includes bias, includes racial, whatever it is. But what it does, I think it opens our mind to a whole world rather than be trapped in our own world.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, the thing about AI is that from an algorithmic standpoint, it's data driven. So we're
Yeah.
looking at the data and saying, what does the data tell us? But data can have bias.
Oh shit. Yeah.
And so, so if you're tapping into the articles from Fox News, you're going to get a different result than if you're tapping into the articles from MSNBC, right? I mean, there's bias in that data,
Yep.
and the language model can't tell. It's just looking at data
Yep.
and aggregating it in the best way it can.
Yep. And the other thing that I've come across recently is the idea of sovereign AI. Because the trouble with capturing all the world's data and putting it into one bowl of soup is
Huh.
that it all becomes homogenous. And the problem with that is that then the world all starts to look the same, which is boring as batshit. I don't want the world to look the same. I go to Europe to see Europe, not to see Australia. So for me, I think human imperfection brings its own joy as well. And, perfection's overrated because job done, might as well fall asleep, right? But
Right. I mean, with some things, it's the imperfection that makes it interesting. Think about art, Monet, Degas, things like that. I mean, you could take a photograph of those images, but what makes it interesting when the artist does it is to get, their own take on it. You see it the way they see it with all its imperfections.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that for me too is it's done some blind testing with even poetry and actually AI art. In other words, poetry created with AI. They've done blind tests, people viewing it and say, "Tell me which one you like best." And the scary thing is that most people choose the AI generated art and poetry.
Ah,
Yeah, which is a
that's
bit
right.
scary. But on the other hand, it's rather interesting. I read Yuval Harari's, the guy that wrote *Sapien*. He's just written a book recently, which he's worried about AI because generative AI is starting to tell stories, and what makes us human is our stories.
Mm.
So, and when you go to write an introduction, humans are humans are pain and happiness machines. We actually learn from pain, or we don't. Um, we're all trying to find our own story amongst all that noise. So for me, his worry is about the fact that um, AI is going to start creating stories that we'll believe, and that will change humanity. So it's quite a fascinating take by him because he's very much into humans' uniqueness is our stories.
Yeah, the only thing that it makes me think about is the fact that a lot of the great literature and great art and music too, I mean, is driven by emotion, right?
Which is your story that you're telling, whether it's in whatever
Right.
media it is.
And emotion is not data. I mean, emotion is something different than that. So I don't think, you might be able to create a table that says, see this, generate this emotion, see this, generate this, but it's still not going to be authentic emotion that you're trying to
Yeah,
generate from a reader or a viewer or somebody who's engaged with your art.
yeah,
Um, I think that's really tricky. I think you can do replication,
mm,
but one of the things about music, I think about too, in every generation, you'll have great bands. We listen to rock music, and some of that music, it's not all just good music. Some of it is angry, right? You get this anger or lovesickness or whatever that emotion is, and they manage to turn it into this powerful music that communicates that to somebody else. but that's not just about data. I mean, there's something more there,
Yeah,
a lived experience, you know.
exactly. So for me, I'm fascinated by the intersection of human and machine. And I think the machine's actually asking us big questions like, what does it truly mean to be human?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So,
But I don't have the
and
answer.
yeah. No, well, that's the fun is the journey, not arriving.
Right.
Yeah, and so for me too, the homogeneous nature of AI is that it's basically not allowed to do bad things. So what sort of try and program it so it only gives positive things. So AI can't sound angry, otherwise it's turned off.
Well, if you want to capture emotion, you have to do all emotion. You have to do anger, you know.
Anger, joy, sadness, all of the
Exactly.
above. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
all right. But anyway, I'm fascinated, and I'm having fun exploring and writing about it. I write to learn. I read to get ideas and information, but then I've got to make sense of it. So, and part of trying to make sense of it is actually having interesting conversations and hearing stories from smart, intelligent people all around the world, such as yourself. So, um,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, this brings me joy. So that leads me and a segue to, so for you, Wilson, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day that would bring you deep joy and satisfaction?
It's a great question. I mean, it's an important question too. I mean, certainly one of the ways we measure success, we keep score is with money. But at least in entrepreneurship, that shouldn't be the goal, and that shouldn't be the primary goal. And the reason why, and don't let investors ever hear you say that, but the reason why is because, honestly, most startups fail. I mean, they don't,
I think it's 9 out of 10 or even higher.
exactly. A lot of entrepreneurs, in order to do a number of startups before they get one that gets traction, is successful. And I'm not saying that to say you shouldn't do it. I'm saying there has to be more in it. There has to be some other passion you're pursuing or some other need you're fulfilling. And if you can make a lot of money along the way, that's a great thing too. Um, so for me, I really like to build things. I mean, I like to start with an idea that I think could change the world, and then try to make it real.
Okay.
And if I can do that, that feels really good for me. And so there's the initial idea, there's additional things that work on it. We're solving problems. And in my case, because I can't paint or sing or anything, I'm using technology to do that. Um, so I enjoy that a lot. I like the idea of making a difference in people's lives,
Mm.
making a tangible difference and making the world a better place. And if I can do that using my art, which is technology, my art form, which is
That's
technology,
your tools. Yep.
then that's a really good thing for me.
Yep. So you are doing what we're designed as humans to be, and we are creators. And we are also watching over the millennia. We've seen that we are actually creative of tools to help us do things better and faster and make a difference. And um, you just said that what brings you joy is creating, and I love that.
Yeah, creating and sometimes understanding too, looking at a complex problem and just saying, "Yeah, I wonder why it works that way. Let's find out."
And that's the other part of being human is some have more of it than others, and that is curiosity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But for me, Joseph Campbell, for me, which brings me joy, and part of my creation is writing,
nice.
and communicating and listening, and trying to be better at it every day. Um, as Joseph Campbell says, we there is no essential purpose to our lives as humans except to follow your bliss. And for me, that is, and follow your bliss means you're following your curiosity. What gives you joy? What sits inside you that says, when I do this, this fan's great. Like you're saying, you're creating from technology tools. For me, I am curious about something, and what I do now is, and I've done it for the last 15 years now since I started my blog on, because I was curious about social media, was to actually, I follow my bliss now, my curiosity, but then create out of that curiosity. That's so I think as following your bliss and then actually creating something out of that is, I think that makes me as human as I possibly can be, and then paths will open and doors will open that you never expected, because we all think we've got control, but at the end of the day, most of the time we don't.
No, no, I actually, I think those are great points. And I talked with an entrepreneur one time. It was a gentleman he started a window company, very successful, ended up selling it to Viking Industries or something. And it was made millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I asked him, I said, "Well, what is your secret? I mean, if you had to tell an entrepreneur, what's the secret to being successful, what would you say?" And he said there are really two elements that you need to think about, spend some time thinking about. One is think about your passions. Everybody has stuff that they feel passionate about, feel strongly about. And he said, and then think about your gifts, the things you're really good at doing. Everybody has some gifts as well. And the right opportunity is probably the one that lies right at the intersection of those two things.
Yep.
Something that you're really good at, but that also brings you joy.
Yeah, that is a great point. And there is a fantastic model for success or for happiness, and it's called the Ikigai model, which is out of Japanese philosophy, which is
Right.
the intersection of those. And you've just mentioned the word intersection of those
Huh?
two. But check out Ikigai. It's really fascinating about what are you good at? What do you love doing? Also, what's your experience? Okay.
Huh?
And then what will the world pay you for?
Okay.
So have a look at the Ikigai model. It's fascinating, I think. And for me, it's the best summation of what you should be doing in life sits in the intersection of all those questions.
No, I'll do it. It sounds great.
Yeah.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to explore more.
So last question. I said the other one's the last question, but this is the last question.
It's
So
okay.
as you're over the years, you've learned a lot as an entrepreneur. You've been an academic. You've learned a lot. So what are the biggest lessons about being in business and life that you have learned along the way?
There's this, there's hundreds. But,
Just give me three.
um, I think the one that well, there's lots of big lessons, fundamental lessons around, about honesty and caring and being authentic. And I think those are pretty straightforward. Well, they should be straightforward. Um, but I think the one I'm playing with more these days is the one of understanding um, planning and forecasting, especially with technology companies, but it can work in life too. So much of what I do, decisions that I make today are based on the alternatives I have to draw on today. But so many of those alternatives are only in place because of things I've done in the past,
Yep. Experience. Yep.
right?
Excellent.
So, you see this when you're coach. I coached football for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years or something, for a long time. And you think about throwing a football, you have to, if you're the quarterback, you have to see how the field is developing, and you have to go where the player is going to be, not where they've been, deliver the ball where they're going to be, not where they've been. And that depends on what's happening on the field. But a lot of that depends on practice, on planning, on the plays, on the environment that you operate in. So as a business owner, I I have to try and understand what's happening in front of me, not just what I'm supposed to be working on today.
Yep.
And so much so many of those decisions depend on stuff that I've already done. So I have to think about what I have to do today so that I can make the decisions I need to make in the future.
Yep. Yep.
And that's really tricky. I mean, if you go out too far, then who knows? There's huge uncertainty because nobody knows what that looks like.
Yeah, the further out it goes, it's just like forecasting the weather.
Exactly. But if it's too close to you, then it's not that helpful, right? You're not prepared for what comes. So how do you find that ideal scope? And what are the important elements that you need to put in place? But if you can do that, I think everything tends to come together a lot more smoothly.
Okay, right, cool.
Yeah.
So, Wilson, thank you very much for sharing your insights and your wisdom and experience and telling me and us some stories. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute blast, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and thank you. I've learned a bunch too. So I mean, it's always a great exchange. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, that's why we sit around fires and tell stories. We learn off each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you.